They told you it was outside of you. They told you to look up to others, follow, obey, mimic. They pointed to the trophies, the titles, the followers, the applause. They said, be like them, and in chasing what wasn't yours, you forgot what was. You forgot that the most powerful force you'll ever encounter is the one buried inside you, the power within. It doesn't knock. It doesn't beg. It waits, silently, patiently, until the day you get tired of crawling through the expectations of others and finally decide to stand on your own. That moment when your bones ache with the weight of pretending, when your voice trembles because you've silenced it for too long, that's when it stirs. That's when the power within begins to rise. You were never meant to find your power outside yourself. That is the truth. Many people spend their whole lives running from, searching endlessly for something to fill the void inside them. They chase titles, applause, approval, love, money, and all the glittering symbols of success, thinking that once they have enough, they'll finally feel powerful. But it never comes, because the power they're looking for isn't out there. It's buried inside, hidden beneath the layers of doubt, fear, conditioning, and silence. It has always been yours, but you forgot. This forgetting doesn't happen overnight. It happens in pieces. When you were young, maybe you were told to be quiet, to sit still, to stop dreaming so big. Maybe you were made to believe your voice didn't matter, that your emotions were too much, that your uniqueness made others uncomfortable, and so you adapted. You dimmed your fire to fit into a world that feared its heat. You wore masks to survive in places that rejected your truth. And with every compromise, every moment of shrinking yourself, your power receded a little further into the background, not gone, just waiting. Because that's the beauty of true power. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't vanish. It doesn't break. It waits, silently, unshaken, timeless, waiting for the moment you're ready to remember. And the remembering begins not in comfort, but in confrontation. You begin to wake up when the life you've built on pretending starts to collapse, when the applause no longer fulfills, when the praise starts to feel hollow, when the roles you've played begin to suffocate. That's when the voice inside you, once silenced, starts to whisper again. It says, there's more, you are more. And in that whisper is the spark, the reminder that your power was never in their hands, that no external achievement could ever substitute for inner alignment, that no relationship could heal the parts of you you're still unwilling to face. That's when you begin to reclaim it, not by doing something extraordinary, but by getting honest. Honest about what you want. Honest about what hurts. Honest about what you've been denying. Because the foundation of power is truth. And the truth starts with self. Power doesn't mean dominance. It doesn't mean control over others. It means sovereignty over yourself. It means knowing who you are, what you value, what you believe in, and living in alignment with it no matter the cost. It means no longer outsourcing your decisions to the opinions of others. No longer needing a crowd to feel validated. No longer waiting for someone to choose you. You choose you. And that changes everything. You stop asking, will they like me? And start asking, do I like me? You stop asking, do I belong here? And start asking, does this place deserve me? That shift is power when you're no longer moved by fear but led by your own compass. And it's not loud at first, it's quiet, steady, real. It doesn't beg for attention. It radiates. It doesn't imitate. It originates. That is what happens when you awaken your inner power. You stop trying to be someone else's idea of success and start becoming your own definition of greatness. And it's not about perfection. Power doesn't come from being flawless. It comes from being willing to rise even when it's hard, willing to speak even when your voice shakes, willing to own your story even when it's messy. That willingness is courage, and courage is the soil where power grows. Every time you choose yourself, your truth, your path, you water that power, and over time it becomes unshakable. People will feel it. They may not understand it. Some will be inspired by it. Others will be threatened by it. But that's not your concern, because true power doesn't need to be liked. It needs to be lived. It needs to be honored. And when you do that, when you stop looking outward and start going inward, you come home. You come home to the strength you thought you lacked, to the clarity you thought you had to earn, to the love you thought you had to chase. You realize it was always inside you. The fire, the voice, the vision, the power. So if you're still searching outside yourself, stop, breathe, go within, ask the hard questions, get uncomfortable, sit with yourself long enough to hear what your soul has been trying to say. Your power is not something you find, it's something you remember, something you reclaim, something you rise into, moment by moment, decision by decision, breath by breath. And once you touch it, truly touch it, you'll never want to live any other way again. From the moment you opened your eyes to the world, you were pure instinct. You cried when you needed something. You laughed when you felt joy. You moved toward what felt good and away from what didn't. You didn't doubt your voice. You didn't question your worth. But slowly the world taught you something different. It trained you to look outward for answers that already lived inside you, to question your intuition, to silence your instincts, to follow instead of lead. It didn't happen violently. It happened subtly, one moment at a time. A parent saying, "Don't be too loud." A teacher rewarding obedience over creativity. A society showing you polished images of who you were supposed to be, and you, trying to be accepted, started shifting. You learned to distrust yourself, not because you were weak, but because you were taught to believe that the people around you knew better, that the rules had already been written and your job was to follow them. You were told what success looked like, what beauty looked like, what intelligence meant, what dreams were worth chasing. And if your truth didn't match that picture, you were expected to conform. Slowly your voice, the one that once spoke freely, grew quiet. You stopped asking, "What do I feel?" and started asking, "What do they expect?" That shift, subtle but powerful, is how most people lose themselves. They stop checking in with their own soul and start checking the opinions of others. They second guess their every move, wondering, is this good enough? Instead of, is this true to me? The tragedy is not that people don't have power, it's that they're afraid to claim it, because claiming it means trusting yourself in a world that taught you to doubt. It means believing in your inner compass when everyone else is reading maps that don't lead to your destination, and that takes courage. Courage, because going against the current isn't easy. It's far easier to be accepted than to be authentic. Far easier to go with the crowd than to walk alone. But every time you betray yourself for acceptance, you chip away at your own power. You dilute your own truth. And over time, you begin to forget who you are beneath the layers of performance. You smile when you're dying inside. You agree to things that drain your spirit. You stay in places that stifle your soul. And all the while, your inner voice whispers, "This isn't me." The truth is that voice never leaves you, even when you suppress it. Even when you ignore it, it stays. Sometimes it shows up as anxiety, sometimes as restlessness, sometimes as a deep, unexplainable ache. That ache is your power begging to be remembered. And until you learn to trust it again, you will always feel incomplete, because nothing external can fill the space meant to be occupied by your own self-trust. Not approval, not applause, not even love from others. You cannot receive what you do not first give to yourself. Learning to trust yourself again is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest. Honest about what you want, what you fear, what you fear. It's about looking in the mirror and admitting that you've been playing a role and that you're ready to stop, that you're ready to live for real, to speak with your own voice, to make decisions that reflect your truth, not someone else's expectation. That honesty, that decision is the beginning of power. You don't need more motivation, you need more permission from yourself. Permission to walk away from anything that dims you. Permission to choose differently. Permission to disappoint others if it means being true to yourself. Because the cost of being liked by everyone is often being known by no one, including yourself. And if you go too long living for their standards, you'll wake up one day a stranger in your own life. A polished image on the outside, but empty within. But the beautiful thing is, you can change that in this very moment. You can decide to return to yourself, to unlearn the noise, to stop chasing someone else's version of happiness. You can start to rebuild the trust that was taken from you. Slowly, consistently, powerfully. You can learn to believe in your gut, to respect your instincts, to follow your heart, even when it's terrifying, especially when it's terrifying. Because your truth will never lead you wrong. It may lead you into discomfort, into growth, into solitude, but never into regret. Regret comes when you live someone else's life and abandon your own. Power comes when you live your truth, even if your voice shakes while you speak it, even if you take small steps, even if the world doesn't understand yet. Because when you trust yourself, you become unstoppable. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop running from yourself. And in that trust, in that return to your own inner authority, you awaken the power that was never lost, just forgotten. And the moment you stop distrusting your voice is the moment the world begins to hear you. Not an echo, but your truth. Unapologetic, unfiltered, unshakable. Owning your power is not a peaceful, pretty process. It's raw, it's uncomfortable, and it will shake everything you thought you needed to hold on to. Because the truth is, stepping into who you really are will cost you the version of yourself that was built to survive. The version that smiled to stay liked, that said yes to be accepted, that stayed quiet to avoid conflict. Power doesn't live in comfort, it lives in truth, and truth often comes with a price. That price is your comfort zone, your safety net, your illusion of control. But what you gain in return is something far more valuable: freedom. The moment you start to reclaim your power is the moment the world around you starts to resist. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're disrupting the systems, both internal and external, that were built to keep you small. Suddenly, the people who like the quiet, compliant version of you start to fall away. They don't know what to do with the version of you who says no, who speaks up, who refuses to compromise their peace for approval. And that's the test. Will you shrink back to be accepted, or will you rise and stand alone for a while to become aligned? There's a reason most people avoid this path. It's not because they're weak, it's because they've been taught that discomfort is a sign of danger, when really it's a sign of growth. When you begin to say what you actually mean, to do what actually feels right, and to walk away from what no longer serves you, it will feel foreign at first. That's because your nervous system has been trained to find safety in dysfunction. You found comfort in being quiet, in staying small, in blending in. And when you break that pattern, it shakes your world. But that shake, that's where the power is, that's where the shift happens. Not in the moments when everything feels good, but in the moments when everything feels unfamiliar and you choose to keep going anyway. That's what power looks like. Not perfection, not confidence 24/7s, but choosing to show up honestly, again and again, even when your voice trembles and your hands shake, even when it means disappointing people, even when it means walking alone for a while. Because every time you choose truth over comfort, your power grows. And don't expect applause. Power isn't loud. It's not about dominating others. It's about knowing who you are so deeply that you no longer seek validation from outside of yourself. It's walking into a room and not needing anyone to understand you because you understand yourself. It's making decisions that are aligned with your soul, not your insecurities. And that kind of power is quiet, but it's unshakable. It doesn't beg to be seen. It just exists. Fully, authentically, unapologetically. When you start to live from that place, you begin to realize how much energy you've been wasting on pleasing, proving, and performing. You start to see how often you said yes when you meant no. How many times you betrayed your own gut just to keep the peace. And that realization is painful, but it's also liberating. Because now you're awake. Now you see the cost of pretending. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You begin to take your power back, one boundary at a time, one decision at a time, one truth at a time. And yes, it will feel like loss at first. You may lose friends. You may outgrow environments. You may find yourself misunderstood. But that's not failure, that's transformation. That's the price of alignment. And the reward? The reward is a life that actually feels like yours. A life that reflects your soul, not your conditioning. A life that makes sense not to them but to you. Because you are no longer building your world on borrowed dreams and secondhand values. You are creating from the inside out. And that's where true power lives. The uncomfortable moments, the silent nights, the tough decisions, those are your initiations, your rites of passage into the life you were always meant to live. They are not the end. They are the beginning of your return to self, to truth, to power. And as painful as that path might be, it is also the most honest one. Because when you finally choose yourself fully, relentlessly, You stop surviving and start living. You stop existing as a version of yourself built to be liked and start becoming the version of yourself built to be free. That's not an easy journey, but it is a worthy one. And every step you take in that direction is a declaration: I am no longer available for anything that dims me. I am no longer available for a life that demands I shrink to be accepted. I am no longer willing to trade my peace for their comfort. I am here to rise. I am here to be seen. I am here to live powerfully, authentically, and without apology. There's a moment often in the middle of the storm where everything you thought was working begins to fall apart. The things you used to lean on don't feel solid anymore. The people you trusted walk away. The goals you chased start to feel empty. And in that space, when the noise dies down, you're left with nothing but yourself, your story, your scars, your silence. That moment is where most people either break down or break open. And the difference between the two is how you choose to see what brought you there. Because the pain you carry was never punishment. It was preparation. The hardships you endured weren't to destroy you. They were forging you into someone stronger, wiser, more awake. We live in a world that glamorizes ease and comfort. If it's painful, it must be wrong. If it's hard, it must not be meant for you. But growth isn't born in comfort. Growth is born in friction, in resistance, in the heat of transformation. When the things you once relied on stop working, you're being asked to evolve. That's not failure, that's transition. That's life trying to expand you beyond what you thought you could handle. Every setback was pointing you inward. Every heartbreak was pulling you toward your truth. Every closed door was redirecting you towards something greater. But in the moment, all you saw was loss. And that's the thing about pain. It doesn't always reveal its purpose right away. It tests you before it teaches you. It demands that you trust the process even when you don't understand it. It asks you to believe in a future version of yourself that hasn't shown up yet. That's why most people stay stuck. They look at pain and see defeat. But those who choose to look deeper, they discover that their worst moments were their most powerful teachers. The betrayal that shattered you taught you boundaries. The failure that embarrassed you taught you resilience. The rejection that crushed you taught you that your worth isn't dependent on being chosen. Pain forces you to meet yourself on a deeper level. It strips away your illusions and makes you confront who you really are when the masks fall off. And while that process is messy, it's also sacred. Because what emerges from the wreckage is not weakness, it's power. A different kind of power. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself. The kind that isn't shaken by the opinions of others. The kind that comes from surviving things you once thought would break you. You start to realize that everything you went through was preparing you for what you're capable of becoming. That the universe wasn't trying to hurt you, it was refining you. It was calling you higher, it was making you strong enough to carry the life you're meant to lead. And no, it didn't always feel fair. No, it didn't always make sense. But the version of you that's standing here now, the one who is still breathing, still fighting, still rising, that version is not a mistake. That version is proof that you are stronger than you believed, more resilient than you imagined, more capable than you were ever told. And when you begin to shift your perspective like that, when you stop seeing your past as something to escape and start seeing it as something that shaped you, everything changes. You no longer feel shame for what you went through. You feel pride. You stop hiding your scars and start wearing them as medals. Because every scar tells a story of survival, a story of growth, a story of power. That's when you begin to walk differently, speak differently, move through life with a quiet confidence that can't be faked. Because now your confidence isn't rooted in a perfect life. It's rooted in a real one. It's rooted in experience, in endurance, in the fact that you've been to your lowest and still chose to rise. And that kind of confidence can't be bought or borrowed. It has to be earned through fire, through pain, through transformation. So if you're still carrying pain from your past, know this: it's not a weight, it's a weapon. When you own it, when you learn from it, when you use it to fuel your purpose, it becomes your edge. It becomes the thing that sets you apart. You don't need to hide what hurt you. You need to honor it. Because what hurt you also healed you. What tested you also taught you. And what broke you also built you. You are not broken. You were being built. And now it's time to step into the strength that pain helped you uncover. Not with bitterness, but with power. Not with regret, but with reverence. Because your pain didn't make you less, it made you more. It made you deeper, wiser, more grounded, and more awake. And that is the true preparation for power, walking through the fire and rising. Not in spite of it, but because of it. There's a dangerous myth that someone or something is coming to save you. That maybe one day the right opportunity will knock, the perfect timing will arrive, or someone will finally recognize your worth and hand you the life you've been dreaming about. That idea is comforting, but it's also paralyzing, because as long as you wait for something outside of yourself to change, you stay stuck, you stay small, you stay dependent. The truth is, you are the one, you are the storm you've been waiting for. The breakthrough, the change, the shift, it begins with you. Always has, always will. We're conditioned to believe that power looks like status or recognition, that you need permission to rise, that someone has to anoint you worthy before you're allowed to step forward. But real power doesn't wait for applause. It doesn't ask for validation. It doesn't need a title or a spotlight. It comes alive the moment you decide to stop waiting and start moving. The moment you realize you've spent too long giving your energy to things and people who don't return it. The moment you stop hoping someone will rescue you and instead choose to rescue yourself. That decision is where everything changes, because the second you decide to own your life, you begin to take back the power you've scattered in 1,000 directions. The power you gave to fear, to judgment, to rejection, to comfort. The power you gave to waiting for things to get easier, waiting for people to approve, waiting for the fear to go away. But life doesn't reward waiting, it rewards movement. It rewards the ones bold enough to say, I might not have all the answers, but I'm moving anyway. It rewards the ones who choose themselves fully and fiercely. And choosing yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. Because the moment you stop choosing yourself, the world starts shaping you into something you're not. You become a reflection of everyone else's expectations. You lose your fire trying to keep everyone else warm. You silence your voice so others can speak louder. But choosing yourself means you stop living as a watered-down version of who you were born to be. It means you start listening to your gut, honoring your boundaries, speaking your truth, and walking away from anything that costs your peace. It won't be easy. You will feel resistance. You will face doubt. You will hear the voices in your head that say you're not ready, not qualified, not enough. But those voices aren't telling you the truth. They're repeating the story of your past. And you get to rewrite that story. Not someday, not when it's perfect, but now. Because there is no perfect time. There is only power, and it lives in the present moment. The power to choose, the power to act, the power to lead. You don't need more followers to be a leader. You don't need a title to be powerful. You don't need validation to be valuable. All you need is the willingness to stop hiding and start living. Because the truth is, you already have everything it takes. It's not about becoming something new. It's about remembering who you are underneath the layers, beneath the fear, the doubt, the conditioning. You were powerful before the world told you to be small. You were worthy before anyone ever measured your value. You were enough before you ever had to prove it. So if you've been waiting, stop. Stop waiting for the fear to leave. Stop waiting for the past to change. Stop waiting for someone to give you the green light. You are the green light. You are the sign. You are the answer. You've spent too long looking outward when the whole time the strength you were seeking was already inside you. It doesn't need to be created. It just needs to be claimed. When you realize that, you stop hoping for a miracle and become the miracle. You stop chasing something outside and start standing firm in who you are. And suddenly, the things that used to intimidate you lose their power. The people who used to control you lose their hold. The fears that used to paralyze you become fuel. Because once you step into your power, the world doesn't shrink, you expand. You are not here to wait your turn. You are here to rise, to lead, to light the way for yourself and for others who are still lost in the dark. You are not a victim of your life. You are the author of it. And the next chapter doesn't begin when someone else shows up. It begins when you do. The day you stop waiting is the day your life begins to change. Not because the world gets easier, but because you get stronger. Because you finally realize that the storm you were waiting to save you is you. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to wear a crown to lead. Real leadership, the kind that changes lives, doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from living your truth so loudly, so fully, that others are inspired to find their own. True leadership is authenticity in motion. It's being honest with yourself, showing up with your imperfections, and walking a path that aligns with your soul even when it's inconvenient. It's not about commanding attention, it's about commanding respect through consistency, integrity, and presence. The world doesn't need more people telling others what to do. It needs more people willing to be fully themselves so that others feel safe to do the same. When you embrace who you really are and begin to live in alignment with your core, people notice, not because you're trying to be noticed, but because something about authenticity is magnetic. It's rare, it cuts through the noise, it resonates on a deeper level. When someone sees you standing in your truth without apology, it challenges them. It wakes them up. It whispers to something inside them that's been buried for too long. Because when one person gives themselves permission to be real, it creates a ripple effect. It shows others what's possible. That's how leaders are made, not through titles, but through example. The pressure to perform, to be perfect, to present an image that fits a mold is heavy, and it's everywhere. We live in a world where image is everything, where everyone is trying to be liked, accepted, and followed. But that kind of surface-level validation can never fill the gap created by self-abandonment. You could have 1,000 people cheering for the version of you that you project, but if you're not being real, you'll feel emptier with every clap. The applause will never satisfy the soul if it's not for the true you. And that's why the most powerful thing you can do is be yourself, even when it's misunderstood, even when it costs you something. Because that kind of honesty builds a foundation no storm can shake. It gives you peace that isn't dependent on how others see you. And when people feel that peace, when they feel your groundedness, they begin to trust you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're consistent, because you're real. And in a world of filters and facades, real stands out, real connects, real leads. So when you show up as yourself, you're not just leading, you're mentoring, you're guiding others home to themselves without needing to preach or convince. Your presence becomes your message. This is the kind of leadership that doesn't always get the loudest applause, but it leaves the deepest impact because people don't remember what you said nearly as much as they remember how you made them feel. And when your energy is rooted in truth, people feel safe, they feel seen, they feel inspired. That's mentorship. That's influence. And it doesn't require a platform, it just requires you to live your truth with courage. You don't have to have everything figured out to lead. In fact, your willingness to grow in front of others is what makes you relatable. It shows that leadership isn't about being above others, it's about walking with them. It's about saying, I've been there too. I'm still figuring it out. But I'm not gonna abandon myself in the process, and you don't have to either. That kind of honesty creates connection. And connection is the foundation of everything meaningful. You were never meant to blend in, you were meant to shine so that others could see their own light reflected in you. Not because you're better, but because you're brave enough to be real. Your authenticity becomes a permission slip for others to drop the act and embrace their truth. And that's what the world needs now more than ever. Not more noise, not more perfection, but real grounded human leadership. Leadership that listens. Leadership that leads by example. So you don't have to wait. You don't have to be certified. You don't have to be polished. You just have to be willing to show up, willing to be honest, willing to be seen. Because when you stop trying to fit into the role of a leader and instead choose to live with intention, integrity, and truth, you naturally become the kind of leader others want to follow. Not because you told them to, but because your life speaks louder than words ever could. You're not here to echo someone else's voice. You're here to speak your own. You're not here to pretend to be perfect. You're here to be powerful through your realness. And the more you embody that, the more you create space for others to do the same. That's the power of true leadership, leading not by force, but by authenticity, not through imitation, but through embodiment. When you live like that, you don't just inspire, you awaken. And that is what makes you a true mentor.